So you're saying a CFO is a cost cutter?
No, I'm saying that
As opposed to a revenue generator?
I'm saying that that is maybe one of his strongest suits. And it depends on the environment. I'm saying that the skill set of a good CEO, I mean CFO,
You see, you're almost saying it interchangeably, you know.
No, sorry.
Freudian slip.
The words are close.
Yeah.
But in a growth environment, in a change environment, I'm not sure, I'm sorry to say this, but in an environment where change is paramount, where innovation is paramount, I'm not sure that I'm going to bet on the CFO personality to be the man, to be the CEO.
But isn't he in the best place?
He's the best place to be the CFO.
Isn't he in the best place because he sees the whole organization as opposed to managers in other areas who may only see one specific area, whether it's a revenue center or cost center or a profit center or one arm of the organization. The CFO sees the whole organization. So isn't he in the best place to take over that job?
I would say he has a strong base, but once again, horses for courses. Depending on the organization, the CFO has a stronger possibility of elevation to the CEO position than many. But if the organization requires rocket science, I'm not sure that a CFO is exactly the person that you want in that position. That
is almost a good statement because there are not much organizations that require rocket science.
Well, I look at occasionally look at making some investment choices in the U.S. And it seems to me that one of the industries that does well for quite some time is the defense industry. Mm-hmm. And so I'm not going to say what you just said there. I think rocket science is a big business.
No, but there are not much businesses that are in rocket science.
Well, I'm suggesting to you in the USA, it's a big business. And maybe it's not a big business here, but across there, it's a very big business. And I'm not so sure how many CFOs make the cut in that environment. I'm not so sure in the world of IT. I'm not so sure how many CFOs make the cut in that environment. Even in my industry, which is the finance business, where you will think that the CFO has one of the strongest pedigree to be elevated to the CEO position. I'm not sure that the majority of CEOs in my business are in fact CFOs. I'm not sure, but you may better be able to come with the empirical proof of whether it is. And I think that that the ability in this particular growth phase of the world, it may well require some specific knowledge, which a CFO has a strong base to grow into. And but innovation comes from very different places in this world now. And I'm not so sure just because you have a wide base that is going to cut it. I think sometimes in this world, specific in-depth knowledge of some particular item may be what is required to drive an organization. No.
Okay. All right.
And if I really can't contain myself, I just want to add just perhaps one challenge, right? I mean, invert the argument. The issue is also, or isn't the issue also that unfettered growth, costly innovation leads to the same thing? In other words, so the CFO may not be able to grow it, so he manages costs and the bottom line is weak. The pure innovator goes in there and innovates at all costs and gets the same bottom line. Revenue is higher, but costs run out of control. So I think what I'm articulating is it boils back down to leadership. And within that whole body of leadership, it's not about the function. So if you take that as your baseline and you step back and you say, well, when I look at my executive team, who's got the widest reach, or who's got the broadest view of things, that's the point of I guess, your starting point or your jumping off point, because the answer to that first question is the CFO. I do believe you then sit back and caveat it and say, well, is he the right leader? Is it the right leader for the business? And does he bring the intangibles that will allow him to be successful?
And you have different situations. You have organizations that require breadth and organizations that require depth. And it depends on the circumstances. If the person with the breadth can't bring the revenue in or can't lead the team because the team doesn't respect his knowledge,
right.
Good? He won't cut it. He won't last. He's going to get replaced. And I really do think that you have to make a choice based on the type of organization rather than painting a broad brush of the situation. But if I were to err on one side, I will go for depth in the current world of change. I would go for more depth and breadth, but you have to pair the depth with a strong CFO that could control, bring maturity and understanding to the circumstances. So it's not a CEO who goes off and, as you fear, does his own thing in an unfettered way. I think if you have a situation that requires specific knowledge, the CEO could bring that, and you have a strong CFO paired with him to make sure that the thing doesn't go out of whack.
Well, I know, Miguel, you must be sitting on there biting your tongue. You know what I mean? You would have heard Miguel's resume earlier. Miguel was once a CFO and he's now a CEO. What's your view? Isn't the CFO best placed in the organization to take over the job of a CEO?
I think that the CFO has access to a lot of information. Really, somebody can look at the whole organization. I think in general, usually when you look at succession planning, the CFO, in many cases, is there. Now, however, I think that we keep saying it's important. I mean, in terms of, it really depends upon what are you looking for in the organization. So, for instance, if you need to, you're at the stage where you really need to grow the business, really grow it, I mean, perhaps what you need is more commercial type salesperson with a very strong CFO looking after him and making sure they don't go too aggressive, right, on that front. But for instance, if you're looking at perhaps the organization, the company really needs kind of realignment and improve processes and what kind of stuff. Well, it's not going to be the sales guy. It's not going to be the commercial person who's going to be there. So probably then the CFO can get into that role. So I think that it really is going to depend on where is the company, the organization, what stage it is. I've gone through being CFO to CEO, and then I went back to CFO, and then now I'm back as CEO. And I tell you, I think that at least for me was not. I don't feel like too different, and building on what Greg is saying, it's also a matter of personality, and you sometimes have some CFOs that are like just too unfriendly, or just too like they really are like
aggressive,
conservative, and is he the right profile to be? Not necessarily, right? Not because you're the CFO, you automatically are ready to be the CEO. I think it's a mix of abilities and character.
So, well, it brings me to my last question before I open the thing to the floor. Ian, isn't the CFO becoming more and more the face of the company outside of the CEO? And let me just preface that by saying, right now the CFO interacts with investors, he interacts with regulators, he interacts with the auditors. I mean, he is the face when it comes to the matters of that. But isn't he, the CFO of the future, going to be more and more the face of the organization?
I think not only by legislation, but by the series of events that have happened.
But I know, I'm talking about the ideal CFO of the future. So, sorry, yes.
I would say yes, and I'm saying in the context of an environment of increasing regulation, greater financial distress when distress occurs. People are looking at the CFO. All you have to do is look back at the Commission of Inquiry into CFO and so on. People in the biggest hot seats in the CFO. Okay, you had the purse strings. What happened? Right? So the accountability, and that's what I would have added to the conversation and say, I say this as a lot. All executive, CFOs, CEOs, they have accountability. The difference between the CEO and the rest is I think there's an element there of courage. Because you make that decision. The CFO could always say, I recommend it to the CEO. So you have some people who will batten that field. And you have some people who are able to learn from that CFO position and be comfortable making that decision. I think that's a build on what Miguel was saying. But coming back to your question, yes, the CFO, because of the overall accountability for the numbers and the validity of those numbers, would have accountability to the regulators, to the market. If you look at the investor briefings now, it's mainly the CFO talking. The CEO will say, well, nah, you also coming in. And if you're wrong, well, I think it's positive. And if you're doing good, well, so, CFO has become a mix of, I don't call it the fun time, but, from the leadership standpoint, yes, the brand of the organization has become more than the CEO, more than the chairman. If you look at the market now, people can tell you who the CFO is, and I struggle with who the chairman is. So the CFO in prominence has risen. But that doesn't mean, I think it's actually chips as against CFO. Because in specialization, you tend to pigeonhole people. And when you deal a lot with reporting and numbers and all that, you have a hard time convincing, because, it's bored to a point CEOs. If you get practical, it's bored to a point CEOs. And, it's how the board, if you look at the majority of CEO appointments, they come from a business line. Let's be frank. It's harder for a CFO, even if they are the right person. I mean, you're an exception, I think, to some extent. The board will say, okay, but how have they managed a business? They've accounted, they've reported on the business performance. But have you been in that position to say, we're going with this investment and not that investment? Because the CFO may have recommended, but the business line head is a mini CEO from business line large corporation, and they make that call, and they look for the backing of these people. So, unfortunately for me, I think the CFO, I've had situations where the CFO would have been the right call, but it has been a tough decision to get board support. Because they got viewed into, people have had to leave organizations to prove to other people that they could have been a CEO. So it's down to a smaller corporation as a CEO.
But isn't that really lack of succession planning? So the board don't want the CFO to leave his post because you can't see somebody replacing him?
I mean, there's all of those elements.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I would really say that because the CEO, the CFO has become a very specialist position,
Yeah.
it's like appointing the general counsel to the CEO. You've gotten to the point where the legislation, the accounting standards and so on have become so important that you don't want to rock the boat, as you say, and move somebody, because it's probably
Absolutely.
in certain industries, it's become so specialized. So, I mean, it's
Yeah.
the CFO has his skill set, and I think a CFO typically has to go through a business line to convince a board to bring in his
And Howard, I just want to add one thought to that though, and invert it, right? The truth is if you're a CFO who has some line of business experience, you're a top candidate as a CFO to move on to a larger opportunity as CFO. But as a CEO candidate, you're limited. What? You only have 2 years P&L experience. So, I mean, from the CFO side as well, you also have to weigh, and that's why I talked about edge and desire.
Yeah, what I'm hearing here, and to me, to move from the CFO position to the CEO position, I've listened attentively, and what I'm hearing is that the real difference really is a minute difference of leadership. Yeah? If the CFO can command the respect of the people below him, that CFO can be a CEO. Yeah? And to command that respect is to move away from that image of the CFO being the bad guy, you know, the cost cutter, the person who actually takes us away from the strategic vision. Because you're saying in our strategic session that we want to do this, and when we put it in our budget, you say, look, try to achieve that with less. You know what I mean? So that's what I'm hearing here. But I wanna share with you a couple slides. You know, and this will be instructive. Let me just hand out the slides here to the panelists here. Yes, pass this one too. Yeah, yes, pass this one.
Thank you.
One more here.
You go ahead. I have a view.
Oh, you can see from there?
I can see from it.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, let me just share with you a couple slides here in the audience, that is. And it's very interesting based on the discussion that we just had.
Stick here.
Hello? Let's see if I can pin myself up. Hello? Are you hearing me? Well, yes. But if you look at this, you can see on this slide here that where CEOs come from, and 26% of the CEOs or the head of finance, came from strategy and corporate governance. 26%. Only 24% came from head of finance-oriented companies or divisions. And that's quite interesting because what it is saying to you here is that you don't necessarily have to be an accountant to be the head of finance. Because the head of finance requires more than just accounting knowledge. The head of finance requires strategic thinking. The head of finance has to be part of that strategic team, that executive that can take the firm forward. Yeah? And this is empirical evidence from a survey that was conducted by E&Y. And it is quite interesting to see that we had people who head the finance division as group CFOs that came as CEOs from other companies, that came as chairman from other companies, that came as CFOs from different companies. And what this one is saying here, 13% of them came from different companies, saying that you actually don't have to be industry specific. Yeah? You don't have to be, but this next slide is quite interesting. This next slide is how did they get to the CFO's position? And 57% were hired from within, but 43% was outside of the company. If we go down again, 70% came from a different sector. It was like Miguel. He came from aviation. He came from something, I know he's in insurance. Yeah? It is like Gregory. He came from a totally different sector, and now he's in banking. So you don't necessarily have to be industry specific. 52% held positions in one country. So you don't necessarily have to work in more than one country to be a good group CFO. You know, I've never worked in another country, and yet still I was the group CFO of Guardian Holdings. But I had to communicate with the people from Curacao. I have to communicate with the people from Jamaica. And I tell you something, it's two different English. The people from Curacao speak very specific English. If you look to make a sarcastic joke with them, they totally misconstrue it. The people from Jamaica, well, that is a whole different ballgame. You know? So, but then 63 came from the finance role, and 37%, which is quite interesting, came from the non-finance role. But this last piece of information here in the pyramid is very, very interesting. Regardless of what, the accounting degree, the accountant, is insufficient to get you to that position. So that CFO's position needs something a little more than just accounting. Yeah? And that's what we offer the school here. The Masters in Finance is something, and Gregory mentioned it, I think Keith mentioned it somewhere there, that you need to embellish that qualification. You need to embellish that somewhat. Yeah? So when you look at it here, 34% of your group CFOs are people who had strategic thinking in mind. Our Masters in Finance provides you with a depth of finance that accountants don't have, and then it also provides you with some strategic thinking. Yeah? I want to just close off on that, and then opening the floor is now available for questions. Brad, some questions and answers before you close off?
Folks, we're going into the question period.
Yeah.
As I said earlier on, if you have a question, annotate it on your card, and Mindy or one of the other ushers will collect it. But before I do that, maybe I could break the ice. I have to say that I was sitting there chomping on the bits, thinking to myself that it really is inappropriate to have 4 CFOs talking about the role as a CFO, and you really needed somebody from another discipline. Because I heard some myths being dispelled and others being reinforced. So next time, Howard, bring somebody from HR or marketing to talk about CFOs. So I want to break the ice by asking, I was going to ask the question about the qualifications. You asked Keith about that. But let me break the ice with the first question, asking, is it a reasonable hypothesis that the role of the CFO has diminished over time in organizations in terms of its perceived importance, in the sense that certainly the group that I worked in at one time, I think most of the chief executives were finance qualified people, and there was a feeling that it took us in a particular direction. And then you started seeing people from other disciplines getting into the CEO role and so on. And the point that I'm making and asking you to comment on, in this day and age of the emergence of the importance of functions, other functions as being equally important, and the collaborative nature of organizations, has the CFO had to take more of a backseat and maybe have more skills and discipline, other disciplines, for him to be really a top functioner?
Let me start off the button before I open it up to the panel here. In Trinidad and Tobago, 50% of the CFOs in the finance sector came with backgrounds as CFOs. I want to put in the right thing. Yeah. In the financial sector here, 50% of the CEOs, in the financial sector here, came from a background of being a CFO at one point in time. So we have RBL right now. The CEO there, the managing director there, was the CFO of RBL at one point in time before he moved out to Citibank and then came back in. We have the last CEO, managing director of Scotiabank being a CFO, a chartered accountant. We had the managing director of Garden Holdings being a chartered accountant. So, and they came from different sectors, etc. Sorry? Intercommercial bank, same thing. And then when you move across the brokerage firms, we have Boss, etc. So I just want to put that. Notwithstanding, being a CFO is not all. I think leadership qualities is what counts. So if you're a CFO and you're that kind of CFO who, a kind of gloomy kind of guy, walks around with this black cloud over your head, and and you're into cutting costs and stuff, you wouldn't get past being a CFO. As a matter of fact, I think you wouldn't become the CFO of the future, because that is not what the CFO of the future is. The CFO of the future is really part of that cerebral, and I want to be very careful with my words here. I don't want to talk about cabals and stuff. That cerebral center that cerebral center that provides strategic direction for the company, the organization, the group. Yeah? So, Miguel, you want to make a comment on whether the CFO is losing its importance?
Well, I not necessarily agree with that. I think that quite the contrary, in light of what is happening, well, the financial, at least in the financial industry, regulations and and all the developments that occurred, in my opinion, was kind of empowered more the CFOs and not really the other way around. Now, it may vary from industry. I mean, it may vary from different different industries. But I would say regulated industries, I think that just because of the nature of the CFO, it has to look into all areas of the organization and has to make sure that the resources are correctly allocated and whatever. I think that, in my humble opinion, it's quite the contrary. I think that, yes, to me, the CFO has taken more relevant. Again, in less regulated industries, that may apply, but that's only